This is part 2, June 6, 2017, of being and knowing, being consciousness. So we left off with the brain, consciousness being reduced to neural activity in the brain. So we know that consciousness consists of sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, so sensation, and also the afferent nerve fibers going into the body that can feel what's happening within the body. Interoception. There's interoception, my body feeling inside, and then exteroception, what I feel in the outside world and see and perceive. So consciousness can't just be the brain. It has to include these things. But yet, if I removed all your senses, you'd still have a sense of presence, of being. This is something called a locked-in state, where the body is completely paralyzed, but the mind is completely conscious. So, if you're still not convinced, and we can debunk this reductionist, materialist view that the mind can be reduced to neural processes and matter. Mind comes from matter. The mind, it can change the neural pathways. So I can very easily, it's much easier to do if you have to see if you have some training, this type of mind training. I can switch from opening my mind and just stopping my thought processes and just not focusing on anything, but seeing everything. So I could see my environment from the periphery, the entirety of it, without focusing on anything, and just sort of be aware of the presence of living things. Let's say, if I'm driving along, the luminosity of the sun in the trees, right? These vibrant green just seems to be almost, it's alive and it's pulsing there with sunlight and shadow and light and dark, but not focusing on any characteristic, not thinking. I could shift from that into thinking about my next talk, or how I'll explain consciousness, and get into the problem and the working and the active meditation, that dynamic process of working through a problem creatively. Right? So I could keep shifting back and forth, and I could do that many times, shift back and forth, and watch myself shift back and forth from an open meditative state to focusing on a creative task, problem solving, right? And back and forth. So, and I could do that in a pattern. I could do it 5 seconds, then 10 seconds to focus on problem solving, then 10 seconds to open meditation. Right? I could do that myself. So it's top down. I decide to do that, and I'm changing the pattern of my brain. I'm changing how the neurons are firing in a very dramatic way by going from meditative state, just open consciousness. That's what meditation is. It's just an openness, and learning how to shut off the stream of endless thought in the brain. Because that thought, with an untrained mind, that thought goes on continually at a very minimal level of consciousness. So throughout the day, the majority of the day, an untrained person will be thinking things that he has very little conscious awareness of. The mind will just worry or anticipate or look back into the past. Usually it's always about something in the past or something in the future, or worrying about some problem, and continually this endless stream of thoughts. And very often they're repetitive. And very often, in the case of concern and worry, they're compulsive. And we have feelings that arise that are uncomfortable, existential feelings that arise that make us uncomfortable, that drive this thinking, this spinning wheel of thought. So, and these things are not creative, they're not going anywhere. It's like the classic hamster spinning in the wheel. It's not solving anything. It's just this constant stream of tension in the brain. And it can become exhausting. If we're uncomfortable with it, we're looking forward to the next pleasure, or we're frustrated with what's happening right now and we want it to change. We want it to do something else, or we're rushing through something and we're impatient, or we're happy because something good just happened and we're feeling happy for a while, but that quickly fades and we're searching for something else to give us that lift. We're constantly seeking this renewal of positive energy in the body through external things in the world. So that's what we're seeking. We're constantly seeking this type of self-gratification, right? This transformation of energy into the body, into some positive feeling and thought process. So most of thought goes on unconsciously and it's wasted. Once we train the mind and we become more conscious of how thought works and we start observing it, we recognize that our thoughts are not what we are. But until then, we're just immersed in them. So going back to this top-down influence, so consciousness, through becoming more conscious, I can change the way the neurons, the neural activity, the brain patterns, the brain functioning, and the brain structure. As I contemplate and meditate deeply upon these topics, I'm literally changing the structure of my brain. So then if I can consciously change the structure of my brain, consciousness cannot be just the neural processes of the brain. Now, admittedly, there can't be consciousness that I know of without having a brain. And also the brain, when we're living unconsciously, these thoughts just happen continually, compulsively, addictively. We're addicted to thinking. They happen on their own. So yes, then I'm not in control. It is the brain. So if you're living unconsciously and you haven't learned to train your mind, then yes, your brain is you. Because your brain is your mind and your mind are your thoughts, and you identify with your thoughts. Very little time you're in control of what you're thinking. Only when you have to focus on a task. Mostly it's worrying. So here we are. We're at the point now. We talked about the body. Yes, I need this body. But it's not, I don't experience myself. I don't experience, when I ask you, what are you? I'm a body. That's not your direct experience. So we talked before about direct experience and direct experience, knowing, direct knowing, that sense of I amness, what it feels like to be me in the world. And then what we made the distinction of knowledge that's transmitted, that's taken secondhand from another source that we accept. So if the scientist, the reductionist tells me that consciousness, what you are, is just your brain, that's not my experience. I don't experience myself as a brain. It's what someone has told me. Or I am this body is not a direct experience. We have sensations. When I say a direct experience, I'm not, the sense of I am is a feeling. It feels like it's somewhere up here. I feel sensations in the body, but the sensations of themselves, the sensations in the body, are not the essence of me. The essence of me, consciousness, is what experiences the sensations in the body. And of course, granted, I need this body to get around. I need it because I am a human, and that's just the morphology, the structure of this organism. But it all goes back to the true nature of self being the experiencer of all the things that take place. So that's the observing presence. So consciousness is not the brain, it's not the body, it's not perception, it's not thoughts, it's not sensations, it's not emotions. Those are all experiences that take place within consciousness. And if you look at it, if you take a little bit of time and generate the reality of what it is, whatever it is that's taking place, there's an observing presence that is the experiencer of all experience. That the body is a part of, the brain is a part of, the nervous system, perceptual system is a part of, but that emerges from and is something greater than the parts. Right? This is called emergence. So this is consciousness, this being, and this knowing, this sense of I am.